everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Redefining Society and Technology podcast. And sometimes guests are so cool and so inspiring that I invite them back on a different show, by the way, because the first time we were talking mostly about the book with Michael Sheldrick, which is the co-founder of Global Citizen, a really important movement organization that we're going to talk about. And at the time, I remember you just published the book From Ideas to Impact, and that was interesting to see how
I think it was even before it came out. I think
you're right.
I think you were one of the first I even spoke about it when it was
wow.
hot off the press. You got the exclusive.
Oh, wow. Look at that. See, I forgot about that. Good thing that you reminded me. And so this time, I wanted you to come back on Redefining Society and Technology because obviously what you do has a huge impact on society. You guys are achieving so much. You're using music, you're using entertainment, you're using a lot of indirect way to create movement that, of course, judging from the results you're having, it's actually working. But also there is a website, there is technology, there is everything that goes around it. And I was curious on what kind of tips and feedbacks you can give to my audience in terms of how even to move into social movement, things that are very human, more and more we are talking about technology because it's part of our life. So it's going to be a wide conversation, but I want to start, of course, with learning a little bit about you and what the organization Global Citizen is all about for those that haven't heard the first podcast.
So, very short story. I grew up in Perth, Western Australia, one of the most isolated cities in the world. I was one of those kids who people probably didn't think would amount to much. I certainly wasn't good at sports. If anyone knows anything about Australians, we love sports. We put it on a pedestal. I was not one of those kids. I could barely kick a football in the right direction. And I also wasn't incredibly academically gifted, at least at the start. And it was only because there was this one teacher at the start of high school who really said to me, listen, you may not believe in yourself, but I believe in you. I think there's more to you than meets the eye. If you put work in, I'll put work in. Let's do this together. And I guess because of that belief, working together with him, I was able to, unlock some hidden potential, which I didn't even know was in there. Got into a top 1% of the state in my results, got into law school, and, was always aware that the reason why I was there is because I had this great opportunity, right? This great teacher. And so I guess out of a sense of gratitude, felt I wanted to give back. And, one of the first initiatives I got involved in was fundraising for charity, building schools overseas in places like Papua New Guinea. But very quickly, we realized that the need to end extreme poverty is greater than any amount of gala night dinners, quiz nights, etc., right? And really, at the time we were realizing that what you need is a movement to end extreme poverty. If you're talking about decisions of businesses, governments, big policy decisions, and how you shift that in order to remove the barriers that keep people living in poverty far beyond their control. It was right at the time that social media was emerging. And if you remember, Marco, 15 years ago, you know how right now at all these conferences you go to, generative AI, it's AI for good, AI for ill, it's AI is what everyone's talking about. Well, it was the same thing with social media 15 years ago. And in fact, if you remember, it was around the time of the Arab Spring, people were actually talking about social media from a hopeful standpoint, how to mobilize, how to bring people together, and how to progress humanity and society. And so Global Citizen, it was really in that context, combining the power of social media and popular culture. Long story short, we developed this model where we did concerts. We developed an app. People would take action by downloading the app. They could accrue points, and in doing so, earn a ticket to our festivals. That was really action taken via social media became our currency. And, more than a decade and a half later, we've generated more than 40 million citizen actions that has helped unlock, together with our partners, more than $40 billion impacting the lives of more than 1 billion people in terms of life-saving interventions. And so that was really, how we used technology and popular culture to advance our mission.
I love that. And that's why I thought after we spoke the first time that we wouldn't move it into the Redefining Society and Technology podcast, because you just summarize it. I mean, you saw an opportunity with social media. Yes, I remember 15 years, 16 years ago. I remember even earlier than that, when maybe the conversation would have been, let's put up a website. Like, because social media was a very big revolution or evolution of the internet itself. It really connected people for good and bad, because everything, I think, it comes with good and bad, especially when we talk about technology. But you definitely use it for good. So I like to go back there at that time. And was it for you like a bet to say, well, there is this social media, let's give it a go? Or did you really sow this communication aggregation way? I mean, did you foresee with your bad money that it was going to work?
I think where I realized the power was, we had long worked, we started working with a group, Rotary International, and they have over 1 million clubs around the world. And they had long worked on this long-standing effort to eradicate polio and make it the second human disease in history to be eradicated. And, we started working with the Rotary clubs, and they were very candid that, particularly in countries like Australia and America, their members were getting older, they were engaged. And really, there was this whole question of how you could bring younger people to the issue of polio eradication, and that young people were engaging in different ways. And in fact, when we had the rare opportunity to meet with Australian politicians and asking them whether the government might contribute, because it had stopped funding the effort to eradicate polio, it became very clear that they were basically asking us to make this issue core, to show them that there was a constituency that cared about this, and how could you get young people involved. And I think the question that we've always grappled with as campaigners and advocates, and I think any good campaigner does this, is you generally don't get people to come to you. You have to go to where they're at, right? And so social media, that's where people had started converging. It began with Facebook, it then became Twitter. And it was right at the time that people were engaging with these platforms for the first time and using it as a way to really reach people, but also showing people that actually you can take action on these platforms. And I think what was compelling about this at the time is it was right in the wake of the global financial crisis. So young people might have been uncertain about their jobs, their economic future, but they still wanted to contribute. And so I think what we were offering was a way for them to contribute through social media. And a very practical example, in Australia, we did this concert, the End of Polio concert. We convinced John Legend to fly all the way to Australia, spent more time flying than he was on the ground. And we basically said, listen, we're not asking people to buy tickets to this. We're asking people to take action, sign our petition online, spread the word on social media, help us get tens of thousands so we can present this to ministers and prime ministers and basically ask them if they would contribute $50 million to eradicate polio. And that worked, and we cut through. And it probably worked in those early years because it was still novel, right? Because it was new. If you galvanized enough people, politicians were responsive to it. I imagine it was in the very early days of email, right? Before people started getting a load of emails that were the same thing that someone had generated, they generally replied to it. And so we basically leveraged that. And I still remember, we were trying to get the government of Sweden to act on one of our campaigns. This must have been about 2014. I still remember getting a phone call from someone in the Swedish Foreign Ministry saying, the Swedish Foreign Minister wants to board this plane, but she can't see her tweets and reply to it because she's getting so many tweets from global citizens that she doesn't even have time to respond. Wow. So can you call it off, right? And so I think we used that in those days. to actually get a response and show leaders, wow, there's a constituency of young people that care about these issues.
Mm-hmm. I love that because that's the multiplier, right? Like
Yeah.
it's kind of like when you talk about cybersecurity. It's not that you look at different way to create fake email. The Nigerian prince or the Spanish prisoner. There's stuff that have been working before email, except that when you go to email and now in AI. You multiply that. Instead of sending one letter, 10 letter, you send thousands, and now with AI you can actually personalize that. So maybe we'll get to AI in a little bit, but I do love the fact that you saw the opportunity there. But the other opportunity that is that John Legend, and you worked with Miley Cyrus, you work with really big names in the industry, and I feel like I love music, and I feel like I look back when I was a kid listening to the music from the 60s and the 70s, how a lot of bands, a lot of singers and artists, they were moving large amount of people by either the war in Vietnam or the old 60s, the Summer on Love in San Francisco and all of that. And I think that there was a period that maybe wasn't that hot, although I remember the concert for in the 80s for the food
Live Aid. Yeah,
Live Aid.
Yeah.
And it was big. It was really big. So was it hard for you to make the connection with the musician that could say, all right, I'm going to give my time, which is worth a lot of money, right, for a cause? I like to think that music, it's important, not just because it's entertaining, but because it's storytelling. It tells a lot of good things and move people. So putting the two together, was it hard?
I mean, it was hard at first because basically, and you learn this, when you first start out with, and it's not just in the music community, it's any industry, but when you have an idea, you find that when you're asking for people to help you, very many folks will respond basically saying, listen, it's a great idea. Come back to me when you have other people jumped on.
Right? Yeah.
People want to jump
Show
on.
me the money first, or the numbers, or
train that's leaving the station.
Yep. Yeah.
And so you need those people. You need people like John Legend, who, by the way, is still working with us. Later this month, we're going to Lagos with him for Move Africa. It's our international touring circuit. So that literally has been a decade and a half as partnership, the same with Coldplay and others. But you need those people to buy into the idea and to actually understand the potential. And I think what we were trying to do at that time, and we still are, was basically to say that there is another way to engage people beyond asking them for money. Yes, people can donate to charity, but people are also looking for solutions more broadly, and they're looking for ways to engage their fans beyond that. And I still see it now in response to the California fires. What was interesting, we recently had this Fire Aid initiative, which I think was incredible. You had all the industry players coming together. You had all the artists coming together, donating their time. And yes, that's raised a lot of money, charitable dollars, to provide immediate relief. But it's great that many of the artists that we've worked with for many years have been reaching out and saying, well, let's also be real to the fact that apparently there's $100 billion in damage that these fires have caused. More than 60% are uninsured, right? California's rainy day fund is just $10 billion. And if this is the first of many natural disasters that we might be impacted by, we need to think about this in a different way, because no amount of charitable dollars, $1 million here, $1 million there, is going to address this. And the thing is, artists are thirsty for that. I just finished a call. We had an entire, Zoom with representatives from across the music industry asking these systemic questions and also wanting their fans to get involved. So I think people have also recognized that, as I talk about in the book, and as you gave me the opportunity to highlight last year that systemic challenges require systemic solutions. And how can we all be part of that? Because the reality is whether you're an everyday citizen or a cultural icon like Taylor Swift, there is a role we can all play.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you said at the beginning, and I think everybody found himself with a good idea, and people forget where they started from, right? It's a thing like, remember when you started, maybe you were looking for a gig to play, and maybe at the time people were like, yeah, but how many people can you bring on the stage? And then you'll probably be like, I don't know, I'm just starting up. You needed someone that believed in you, like your professor in school that say, hey, you got potential. And I think that if you start that you got potential chain, then you can play a much bigger role right now. And have you used a little bit of the gamification system into the donation, into become a citizen? Because I'm asking you because I get kind of that feeling when I go on the website of Global Citizen, is like, you become a citizen if you do certain things, right? And you get that empowerment to say, well, maybe I don't have the money, or maybe, a restraint in an economic situation, maybe I have $1, but I get sometimes on my hand, and I get something I can do. And again, technology can really help in doing this.
So I think it's two things. We acknowledge that ultimately people have a whole range of interests, right? Whether that's sports, whether that's music, whether it's chess or it's reading, whatever, right? And we acknowledge that for most people, doing good is something that they want to incorporate as part of their lifestyle. They want to do good, but they also want to enjoy life as well. And that's the point of living. That's the point of being around. And so I think the idea of giving a reward that aligns with someone's interest, it's really as a thank you. It's saying, thank you for taking action, and here's something you might be interested in. But what I find year after year is how people get exposed to the platform and then they stay taking action. And one of our supporters is Bridgewater Associates, and the CEO of Bridgewater, you might think, okay, this guy can buy tickets, he can go. Before we even knew him, before we even met him, he had basically been taking action himself and earning tickets every year to get into the Global Citizen Festival. Yeah, going back to 2012.
That's cool.
And last night I was at a function and someone came up to me and said that someone who had gotten involved now lives in Hawaii, is picking up plastic on beaches in Hawaii as a result of Global Citizen, right? as well. So I think it's an entry point to broader engagement, to learn about these issues. But it's also a recognition that, people want to enjoy doing good at the same time. And I think right now that's more important than ever, because you need to give people hope, and you need people ultimately to feel good, especially right now when we have multiple crises seemingly bombarding us day in, day out. And I think also a way to be exposed to good stories as well. So what's amazed me is the points of engagement that's often begun with earning a ticket to a festival.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also wanted to highlight that because I found myself, let's say during the pandemic, like we do a lot of conference coverage. So we go places, usually cybersecurity or technology, and with the pandemic, it became virtual. And then eventually the pandemic ends, or there's the tail of it, and a lot of conferences, I'm talking about 40,000, 50, 60,000 people conference, B2B, some of them, they decided, well, we're going to go back to not streaming anymore. And I'm like, why would you do that? Because nobody, or not everybody, can afford to go to San Francisco, go to London, go to Las Vegas, go to Melbourne. And in order to get involved with the community or the network, you need to fork I don't know, $10,000 just to get there. So I look at technology as an enabler to say, I can do something somewhere in for something that happened in LA, even if I never even gone to LA, or help somebody in South Africa or in Africa or anywhere in the world. And there is that line that is very blurry at this point between what you do in real life, and I'm doing hair quote for the people listening to the podcast, and digital life, because I don't see that difference anymore. You do something online that changed somebody's life somewhere else. You've done something concrete. It's not a video game. It's it's not virtual reality that then you shut it down and you're back where you were. You're really changing things. And I want your perspective on maybe how in these 10 years you've been doing this technology advancement, including generative AI, virtual reality, whatever comes to your mind that you want to share. It's been some kind of another eureka moment for you to say, hey, maybe Global Citizen can use this, and maybe you use some of these data analysis, I don't know, whatever.
Well, and definitely can dive into that. I think one point I just want to make is a broader one is that technology platforms today really enable all of us to be content creators.
Yep.
And the good thing is there's really a market like through the internet and around the world for really any kind of interest, right? Mm-hmm. And so my response to, as you said, conferences, going back to normal, blocking out ways to share content is okay. If you're producing that content anyway, why not leverage it to engage and recruit what could be a loyal group of supporters? And one thing I would say additional to that is we tend to underestimate the impact of people we reach online. And we don't think that often that people we reach online will translate into real world impact. So, we might have people in front of us. We might be talking about how they can make an impact. We might be able to track that. But for example, when I was and still am doing this book tour, but when I've been on book tour, one memorable moment last year was I was in Utah in Salt Lake City. I think I was actually speaking to a Rotary Club. And this father comes over to me and he says, "Oh, it's you I have to thank for paying for my daughters to go over to New York last year." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "Well, my daughters found the Global Citizen app, and we agreed that if they took action and won tickets, I would pay for them to go to New York to your festival, right?" And then he was telling me since what his daughters had been doing since then. Now, obviously, they had the resources to travel. Recently, I was in China, in Shanghai, and so I met this teacher who, for her, didn't have the ability to travel, right? So this is a contrasting example.
Yep.
And she pointed out that for the last 10 years, she's been watching the Global Citizen Festival, and so much so that she now gets her students to watch it as well and to do school projects around it for the last 10 years, right? And so in my view, there is no difference in terms of that young woman in Utah and her father who we've impacted through the technology platform, and that teacher and her students in China who may not have actually participated physically but have still been exposed and now writing their class projects on this. And that's the power of technology. And I think we underestimate the impact it can have. And even in small subtle ways, like I started a newsletter on Substack a few years ago, and I'm amazed by the response. And okay, it's only a few thousand, it's not a big community, but I write to them. But the number of people who say, wow, keep that up, that made a difference, I took action on that, and I think we all have the ability to do that and connect in a way which is really, that's the spirit of Global Citizen. Now, of course, to your point, we're also running a nonprofit, right? And we have to raise funds, we have to engage people. And in that sense, of course, technology helps us with efficiencies, right? I cannot tell you how much easier and faster it is to churn out proposals for grant applications. I used to hate grant applications because we'd be applying for this foundation, we'd be like, oh my goodness, I have to write this big grant, it's going to take ages, I have to copy and paste from there. Those days are long gone, and you can tailor it. It's specific. If you know how to use the technology well, it's really incredible how quickly that can make your life easier. The same for translations, for actions, and really also, I think as advocates, one of our best, most effective, when we're at our best, when we're at our most effective, it's when we're communicating in a way that audiences engage. To be able to use technology to help us refine our arguments, to put ourselves in the shoes of others, it's really extraordinary and can make us better advocates.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to go back to the lady in Shanghai that felt like she belonged, and it's not because she never met you guys or been to a concert or one initiative. Again, digital or not, she belongs, right?
Exactly.
I mean, and that's what it's magic, I think, about being human is, like I just published it actually yesterday with a person I met in Melbourne at a cybersecurity event in November. She does a lot for the young kids and educating for social media, cybersecurity, all of that. We were talking about the social media ban in Australia for social media for the 16 years old or less. And, we were bold in what we think about it, and we didn't agree with it. Maybe it's going to shake something. But the point was the communities that may be broken by that. Like she mentioned, like Australia, it's a very large country with a lot of remote access for people that are, in certain community to be able to connect together. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, no more, right? And again, I just want to make the point that just because it's digital, it doesn't mean that it's not real. So whatever you can use to get involved, it's good.
Well, and I think one of the biggest things, right, is do you fight change or do you adapt to it?
Right.
And
Love it.
And I think, generally when you fight change, it never works, right? Like I remember back in the days when Google was first introduced, being at high school, and I hear these stories about some schools banning the use of Google, right? Or the use of Wikipedia. And actually it was about, well, no, just train people how to use it. Be alert. If you're using Google, be alert to information sources. If you're using Wikipedia, go to the sources and find it out. And how do you use it in the right way? And increasingly with tools like AI, it's about the questions you ask and how quickly you can do it. Because trust me, I'm a professor now at Columbia University. You can tell if someone's just giving you something that isn't thought for and well thought out, and if someone's genuinely engaged with the subject matter. Now, I do think, that being said, there are questions for policymakers, for regulators, right, in terms of, okay, how are these technologies rolled out? In the same way with cigarettes that we publish health warnings about it, with social media, should we be publishing health warnings about it? Should we be publishing the risks? Do we need to put in a greater emphasis on social media literacy? When I was at school, I studied health like everyone else. You learn about sex education, all these important issues. Social media literacy should be part of that. AI literacy should be part of that. And we should have debates around, intellectual property, for instance. Like, I think there needs to be guardrails in to make sure that AI doesn't infringe upon the rights of creators, whether that's musicians, filmmakers, to earn a fair income from their products, from their creations, right? But that's not the same as banning these tools. And I think, you have to be careful, because if you ban it, are you basically running the risk of putting a whole generation of people at risk of falling behind competitors as well? And I think, it's interesting. This morning I was speaking to this young guy in Zimbabwe who was a plumber, happened to be the plumber for the head of Google Cloud in Africa. And because of that, was given, I think, some kind of scholarship to basically, learned some digital skills and is now
Wow.
an instructor at an outfit called Digital Skills Africa. And they've just been working with Microsoft on this partnership to train 1 million people across South Africa as
Wow.
a result of this, right? And we were talking about, really literacy, like this is so fundamental, and we need to see it like nutrition, like health, like all these other fundamental areas. It's the same with technology.
Absolutely. And when you mentioned the first reaction back in the days to the social media or Google in school, and it's been the same reaction with ChatGPT. I mean, the first reaction was, we're not going to allow it. And the answer of people is a little bit smarter and open to that is like, you can't. You can go back. You can put it back in the can. At this point, is updating every few weeks, and it's amazing. It's an amazing tool, but again, need to train people on how to use it.
And it heightens the bar, right? Like,
Right?
in the same way at maths, once smart calculators were introduced, you were suddenly changing what you were testing students on. You weren't testing them on what would have once been complicated sums. The bar was heightened from what it was 50, 60 years ago.
Yeah, the basic has become a higher level, and your goal is going to find out the people that use it as a shortcut, right? I mean, there's no questions about it. You know what? Another thing I'm curious is like, so global citizen, for people that are not familiar with it, what do you guys focus on? I mean, what are the causes that you promote the most? And with that, I'm going to add the question, which is, has it changed your focus because technology has allowed you to focus on different things or different way to maybe achieve change?
Yeah, I think it has, and it hasn't. Same time as the short answer. So very quickly, Global Citizen is a movement of more than 12 million citizen advocates around the world, and in that respect, our mission is to end extreme poverty. So we focus all of our citizen actions on this mission, and we say pop meets policy as our DNA. So leveraging the power of popular culture to influence public policy change. Right here at effectively the start of 2025, we really have 4 key initiatives we're working on right now. The first is to protect the Amazon. We have a campaign to mobilize $1 billion to support indigenous communities in the Amazon rainforest, the lungs of the earth. And this will culminate in a major global citizen festival we're hosting later this year in the Amazon. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be in Brazil. Wow. Big artists. It's going to be incredible. Secondly, we're focused on scaling up renewable energy in Africa because 600 million people don't have access to reliable energy. And we think there's a huge opportunity to bridge the gap with access to reliable, affordable solar power, for instance. Thirdly, we're focused on saving millions of children's lives over the next 5 years through access to basic healthcare, including vaccines. We have a big initiative we're working on to raise the funds needed for that. And fourthly, and I mentioned this earlier, we're focused on building what could be Africa's first international touring circuit called Move Africa. And that's because we believe music itself, the live events industry, could create jobs and actually be part of the solution when it comes to alleviating poverty. We think across the continent of Africa, there's huge potential. When you take into consideration, this is the youngest, most dynamic continent. 70% of the continent is aged under 30. Decades from now, 1 in 4 people on the planet will be of African descent. This is a continent that's going to drive the music we consume, culture, food, clothes, you name it. And so we think there's a huge potential around the creative industry. And so we're really excited to be part of that. And as I said, taking John Legend to Africa later this month. I think in terms of the way technology is playing out in all of these areas, look, of course, specific to each of the campaigns, right? the Global Citizen Festival Amazonia, right? Of course, technology can be used to track illegal deforestation in the Amazon and show us how much progress we're making. It can also be used to help us make festivals itself more sustainable. You know, last year on the Great Lawn of Central Park, we used a battery, for instance, for the first time. We powered it through battery storage. So we're seeing us being able to actually harness it to make our carbon footprint more sustainable. And that also goes with using the app, using technology to really take global citizens participate in and help them address their sustainability as well. Of course, when it comes to scaling up renewables in Africa, you're already seeing technology is at the heart of that. You know, you look at solar, for instance, you know, it's very different to fossil fuels. Fossil fuels is about a commodity. It's based on supply and demand. Now you're seeing with something like solar power, the technology exponential curve in the same way you saw this with chips manufacturing over the years as well. And that's why ultimately we're bullish that renewables is going to be the cheapest, the fastest way to supply energy. When you look at the cost from fossil fuel-based energy, it's mainly remained stagnant over the last few decades. When you look at our campaigns to mobilize commitments to save millions of children's health, you know, really the way technology is coming in there to show constituencies of people who care about this issue. We have a bold goal to increase our membership from 12 million citizens to 50 million citizens over the next 5 years to actually show leaders, well, people actually care about this. And just to put that in perspective, Marco, that's going to require us to really significantly increase our annual growth rate. And the only way we can do that is through technology. That's the only way we can do that, whether it's an always on social media strategy and using technology to rapidly reply, translate, reach new geographies around the planet. Technology is the answer. And then finally, Move Africa. Well, there it's interesting because, you know, it's almost become a cliche. People are talking about the jobs that's going to be lost as a result of technology, right? They talk about, you know, jobs in manufacturing and agriculture, the traditional industries that have helped lift communities out of poverty. Well, then you hear people saying, well, the answer is creativity, right? People say, study humanities, study, soft skills. Let's get people unleashing their creativity. But the reality is unless you have appropriate public policies in place around copyright, around intellectual property, the creative industry could actually end up being one of the most vulnerable to become an AI generation. But if we get that balance right, then creators actually have the opportunity to leverage the power of AI, produce incredible work and earn revenues from it, right? And these could be incredible, huge industries. Last year at the UK Economic Investment Summit, they listed the creative industry as one of the huge areas that could be a source of growth alongside clean energy, AI, etc., for the coming decades. So yes, there's policy challenges. We need investment, of course. We need people to be able to access the internet. We need people to be able to access energy. But the solutions are all there if we want them.
I think I was taking notes. I think I have ideas for at least another 10 episode right now, just based on what you said, because, you know, my head obviously is going in terms of the new jobs that they didn't exist before. It's like that fear, the ludities back in the Industrial Revolution. I wanted to break the machine because the fear of it. And then eventually you just adapt and you realize that, technology brings changes, and we need to be objective. We need to be logic about it. We can't just open the door to every single piece of technology that comes, but there's always a way to balance it and see where it brings. All the things that you listed in terms of what you guys are doing now, it just blows my mind in terms of everything you were saying, even before you explain how technology, because my brain is already in technology. I'm like, yeah, I mean, renewable energy is much more democratic. You know, if you can get the solar panel, you don't need to be near an oil well. in order to extract it. You can just be anywhere where the sun shines, which,
Exactly.
it's going to shine, especially in Africa, I guess, and all the other things you talked about. So I love how you embrace this. I think a lot of people, when they think about resolving poverty in the world, they think about, I got to give the money, and then I don't know where is it going to go. Is it somebody going to pocket it? And I'm thinking a little Italian here, but it's like, give me the proof of what you're doing with this. And I think you guys certainly, and I'm sure there's other nonprofit organizations that are doing an excellent job. I mean, you're proving the fact that you've been raising this money. I mean, I know you were at the World Economic Forum a few days ago. I mean, you're moving government, and I think that choosing to use the power of pop culture and that I think is a natural human need of people to do good. I mean, unless you're a sociopath,
you want to do good. What's interesting, I think two things. One, yesterday I had the opportunity to present into this audience, and it was a fairly high net worth crowd. And what struck me is, they were all talking about what drove them and how much giving was at the heart of what they felt was to live in a good life. And someone said, you are usually satisfied when you're feeling that there's a particular issue you're passionate about and you're able to give 100% or feel like you're giving 100% of your effort of how you can add value and contribute. And I thought that was a good way of looking at it, because these are people who have made lots of money, been very successful, and yet they all had come to this realization that there was something at the core of giving. And the good news is today, we don't have to be Bill Gates, right? You don't have to be a billionaire in order to be a philanthropist. I genuinely think all of us, because of technology, actually have the ability to make a difference. You don't have to wait until you've made a big fortune. You can build that in from the get-go in terms of your lifestyle. And I think there is something about it that is actually, foundational to health, to be honest. Like what we were talking about before about, different ways in schools, different forms of literacy. I think giving and being part of this and taking action is the antidote to much of that apathy and despair many people, particularly young people, feel right now. And I think it's, it remains true that the best way to overcome that is by sharing stories of what has worked, what's made an impact. And I also think groups like us are beholden. We track all of the commitments that global citizens have campaigned on and been a part of impacting. We track them all in Salesforce, and we have, each of them at different stages of the journey, in terms of implementation, but being able to track them all and report back is really important in terms of boosting confidence and trust. And in the same way, answering the question, is my money having a difference? Well, you can also answer the question, are my actions having a difference? And I think if you can show that, if you can show that we can make a difference because we have made a difference, then you're onto something really special. And I think something that, is part of the response, I think, that's needed right now in terms of the world in which we live, and the sense of apathy, I guess, that so many people feel right now.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it is a great way to end this conversation. Of course, I want to have you back with some more update, but I think that's just another thing that you said about technology. You mentioned Salesforce. Here's another piece of technology, right, to track what you guys are doing. And then I'm thinking kind of like a blockchain to see like, where is my money going, and to be able to see that on the app and say, hey, I just contributed, maybe very little, but
well, I look at taxpayers asking this question, right? And and I know I won't weigh into what's currently happening here in America, whether that's good or not. I will just anecdotally share my own experience. So my wife and I, we live here in New York. We put in our tax return. And for one reason or another, I don't understand this in the 21st century. They insist on sending us a check in the mail. And this check, it's not tens of thousands of dollars, but for us, I'm a charity worker, it's still a significant amount that the Treasury owes me as a taxpayer. Anyway, this check goes missing, and Treasury trying to get hold of someone, first of all, is a challenge in and of itself. And then we ring back, finally they issue another check, that goes missing. I think it takes 2 years ultimately before we get this check, and it's gone missing. Meanwhile, here's the thing. Someone is banking our checks. So someone is banking our checks. Unfortunately, our bank, we alert it as fraud, so we're not out of pocket. But obviously, this is the Treasury's out of pocket, someone. So there's probably thousands of dollars that's being lost here before we finally get our check. And so I think, wow, this is where something like the blockchain, direct payments, right? This has to be made simple. This is our experience. How many people are experiencing this around? And I think this goes to trust. And when people say, okay, are there fraud? This is what reinforces that. And I think there is no reason as well why, if you have these issues, people these days need the angst of trying to get someone on the phone, days in, day out. And so I genuinely think governments incorporating these technologies can actually deliver better services. And that's what's going to boost trust in the meantime. Just Marco, you've been very, gracious to have me back for a second time. You mentioned the book, From Ideas to Impact, and I've been overjoyed by the response, and people have said it's a concise way to make a difference. I did want to share something because this is about technology, and this is first.
Go for it.
In the spirit of giving you an exclusive again, I have been writing a bonus chapter, which I'm still finalizing, planning to release. It's actually called The Innovator. If you remember in the book, I have 3 other leadership stars, which I break down the visionary, the diplomat, the implementer. And this is about the innovator and how all of us can play a role. And so if you reach out, Michael at michaelsheldrick.com, or via the website, michaelsheldrick.com/book, you get a copy. You can email me. I'll make sure you get a copy of that bonus chapter, but it has a specific emphasis on technology. And I hope it will inspire others. And of course, it's inspired me because it's built on many of the stories and insights I've been fortunate enough to come across, even on the last year while being on this book tour. But just wanted to give you a big thank you, because in the spirit of getting behind ideas, you were pretty much the first podcast I spoke to last year. So very grateful to you.
Well, then you know what? I'm going to bring it to the next level. When you release that chapter, just come back so we can talk about the innovator role in our society and technology. All right, that's perfect. I want to end actually with, of course, I'm going to put all the links to your website that you just mentioned is going to be in the notes of the YouTube video, also in the notes of the podcast. But you mentioned do something, and in one email that we exchanged, you mentioned Eleanor Roosevelt, her quote, "The way to begin is to begin." I want to end with that. I'm ending with the way to begin is to begin. And maybe just with a simple app, you can make the difference. So, Michael, great as usual. Have a chat with you. I hope you come back. I hope we do some things together. And for everybody listening, just subscribe to the podcast, and there'll be many more, I think, very intriguing conversation coming up to your favorite podcast and YouTube channel. Take care, everybody.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.